$140,000, Marcus. You couldn't fix my Camry 2 years ago.
That's not your business anymore.
Everything that touches you is my business until I get what's owed to me.
The horn blared behind Marcus Whitfield before he even registered what was happening. He was standing on Rodeo Drive, keys still warm in his palm, sunlight bouncing off the freshly waxed hood of his white G-Wagon, when a voice cut through the Beverly Hills morning like a blade through silk. "Marcus! Marcus!" He knew that voice. He'd know it in his sleep, in a crowded stadium, underwater. 3 years of marriage did that to a man, burned a voice into his bones so deep that even after the divorce, even after the restraining distance they'd both silently agreed to keep, one syllable from her could still stop his heart mid-beat. He turned, and there she was. Simone, hand already on her hip, hoop earrings catching the light, eyes narrowed like she'd caught him committing a crime instead of simply existing. If you're watching this from Atlanta, from Houston, from London, from wherever you are right now, drop your city in the comments below. And if stories about love, betrayal, and the truth finally coming to light move you the way they move me, hit subscribe, because this one is going to stay with you. Simone. His voice came out flatter than he intended, steadier than he felt. Don't Simone me like you don't know exactly what this is. She gestured at the truck with a sweep of her manicured hand, as if the vehicle itself were the crime scene. $140,000, Marcus? You couldn't afford to fix the transmission on my Camry 2 years ago, and now you're out here in a G-Wagon? A small crowd had begun to gather near the Prada window, the way crowds do in this city whenever the air smells like drama. Marcus felt his jaw tighten. "That's not your business anymore," he said quietly. "We've been divorced 14 months. Everything that touches you is my business, until I get what's owed to me." Simone stepped closer, closing the distance between them, like she used to when she wanted to win an argument through proximity alone. "I gave you 3 years of my life. I stood by you when you were sleeping in your car outside job sites. I believed in you before anybody else did. And now you're driving around like new money, like I don't exist?" There it was, the sentence that always did it to him. I believed in you before anybody else did. It used to make him feel loved. Now it just made his stomach turn, because he was starting to understand that belief, for Simone, had always come with an invoice attached. "I owe you nothing," Marcus said, and for the first time in a long while, he meant it fully. The settlement was final. You took the house. You took half of everything liquid. That was the agreement. The agreement didn't account for you blowing up a startup into an 8-figure company 6 months after the ink dried. Her voice cracked slightly, not with sadness, but with the particular fury of someone watching a jackpot slip through fingers they thought had already closed around it. "You think that's fair? You think God's going to let you skate off into the sunset in a $140,000 truck while I'm renting a 1-bedroom in Inglewood?" Marcus exhaled slowly. He'd promised himself, after everything, that he wouldn't let her pull him back into the old rhythm, the accusations, the guilt, the exhausting dance where he always ended up apologizing for things he hadn't done. He'd built a life since then, a real one, quiet mornings, a daughter who still trusted him, a company that, for the first time, felt like it belonged to him and not to the version of himself Simone had spent years trying to shrink into something more manageable. "I have somewhere to be," he said, and turned toward the driver's door. "You always have somewhere to be," Simone snapped, "except when I needed you to stay." Something in her voice made him pause. Not because he doubted himself. He'd done the work, the therapy, the long nights untangling what was real from what she'd convinced him was real, but because, for one unguarded second, he saw something flicker across her face that looked almost like grief, almost like the woman he married, before the version of her that counted his money like it was oxygen had fully taken over. He didn't have time to examine it. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A text from his sister, Dana. "Call me when you get a second. It's about Dad." 4 words that rearranged the morning entirely. Marcus hadn't planned on falling in love with construction. Growing up in South Central, he'd watched his father, Otis Whitfield, come home every evening covered in drywall dust, hands cracked from decades of manual labor. A man who built other people's dreams for 31 years and never got to build his own. Marcus swore he'd do something different, something bigger. He studied structural engineering at Cal State, worked himself into exhaustion for firms that never promoted him past reliable, and finally, at 34, with nothing but a truck, a dream, and a wife who told him he was chasing something that would never come, He started Whitfield Structural Design. The first 2 years nearly broke him. He slept in his office. He missed Simone's birthday twice. He watched his marriage erode one missed dinner at a time. And every time he tried to explain the sacrifice was temporary, she looked at him like a woman watching her investment underperform. Then, 8 months ago, 3 months after their divorce was finalized, everything changed. A boutique hotel chain in Malibu commissioned his firm for a redesign that went viral in architecture circles. Then came the Nguyen family's oceanfront estate. Then came the contract that changed his life permanently, a $42 million luxury development in Culver City, with Marcus's name on the blueprints. He wasn't rich the way old money was rich, but he was, for the first time in his life, secure. And secure, to a man raised the way Marcus was raised, felt like more than any amount of money ever could. His daughter Zoe was 7, sharp as a blade, and the one person on earth who could make him forget every hard year in under 30 seconds. Custody was 50-50, an arrangement Simone fought bitterly during the divorce, and then, strangely, stopped contesting almost overnight. Marcus never asked why. He'd learned not to poke at gift horses where Simone was concerned. He picked Zoe up most Wednesdays for dinner. Tonight was one of those nights, and as he pulled up outside Simone's apartment complex in Inglewood, the G-Wagon looking wildly out of place against the peeling stucco, he felt the same tightness in his chest he always felt lately. Not guilt, exactly. Something closer to unease. Like a man walking past a door he knows is locked, but still checks twice. Zoe ran out before Simone even opened the security gate, backpack bouncing, twin puffs bobbing. "Daddy, is that the new one?" She pressed her palm against the shining door panel like she was blessing it. "That's the new one." He scooped her up, breathing in the smell of her strawberry shampoo, and for a moment the entire ugly scene on Rodeo Drive faded into background noise. Simone appeared in the doorway behind her, arms crossed, watching them with an expression Marcus couldn't quite place. Not warmth. Not hostility either. Calculation, maybe. The look of someone doing math in their head. "Have her back by 8, Simone said. "She has school." "Same as always." "Marcus." Her voice dropped, quieter now, almost private. "We need to talk, really talk, not like earlier." "There's nothing to talk about." "There is," she said, and something in her tone made the hair rise on the back of his neck. "You're going to want to hear this one." He didn't respond. He buckled Zoe into her booster seat, forced a smile for his daughter's benefit, and pulled away from the curb without looking back, though he could feel Simone's eyes on the truck the entire length of the block. Dinner with Zoe was the good part of his week, the part that reminded him why any of the exhausting hustle mattered. She talked about her class hamster, about a boy named Kingston who ate paste, about how she wanted to be an architect and a veterinarian, because why not both, Daddy? Marcus laughed for the first time all day. It wasn't until he dropped her back home, watching her disappear through the gate with a wave, that his phone rang. "Dana." "Hey sis, sorry, been a long day." "Marcus," his sister's voice was tight, careful in a way that immediately put him on alert. "Dad had a fall this morning. He's at Cedars. They're running tests." The world tilted slightly. "Is he? How bad?" "They don't know yet, but Marcus," Dana hesitated, and in that hesitation Marcus heard something else, something underneath the fear for their father. "There's something else, something Dad's been trying to tell you for weeks, and you kept brushing off because you were busy with the company." "What are you talking about?" Dana's breath came shaky through the line. "It's about the land, the old property on Slauson. Dad's been getting letters. Somebody's trying to claim it. And Marcus, the name on the paperwork, it's Simone's." Marcus stood frozen in his driveway, the G-Wagon's hazard lights still blinking behind him. Simone's words from that morning suddenly ringing in an entirely different register. "You think God's going to let you skate off into the sunset?" She hadn't just shown up for a truck. She'd shown up because she already knew something he didn't. Cedars Sinai smelled like antiseptic and fear, the way every hospital did, and Marcus hated that smell more than almost anything in the world. It reminded him of the year his mother passed. 3 weeks of fluorescent lights and vending machine coffee that never once made the waiting feel shorter. Otis Whitfield was sitting up in the bed when Marcus arrived, looking smaller than Marcus remembered, though it had only been 2 weeks since Sunday dinner. 71 years old, and for the first time in Marcus's life, his father looked breakable. "They're saying it might just be my blood pressure," Otis said before Marcus could even ask. "Dizzy spell. Fell in the kitchen. I'm fine, boy. Stop looking at me like I'm already in the ground." "Dad." Marcus pulled a chair beside the bed. "Dana said something about the Slauson property, about paperwork with Simone's name on it." Otis's jaw tightened, and for a moment he looked away, toward the window, toward the parking structure beyond it. I didn't want to worry you with it, not with everything going right for you finally. Dad. His father sighed, the same sigh Marcus had heard 1,000 times growing up, the sound of a proud man forced to admit something he wished he didn't have to. That land's been in our family since 1974. Your grandfather bought it back when black families in this city couldn't get loans for property nobody wanted anyway. It's not worth much on paper, but it's ours. It's the last piece of what he built. And Simone? About 6 weeks ago, I started getting letters from a law office, some kind of claim being filed, saying there was an old easement agreement, some paperwork from before your marriage even started, that gave partial ownership rights to whoever held title through marriage into the family. Otis shook his head slowly. I thought it was a scam at first. Then I saw the name on the filing. Simone Renee Whitfield. Marcus felt something cold settle in his chest. She kept using Whitfield after the divorce? Apparently for exactly this reason. Marcus sat back, his mind racing through the timeline. The divorce, the custody arrangement she'd stopped fighting so suddenly. The land his father had mentioned in passing months ago that Marcus, buried in blueprints and deadlines, had never followed up on. It wasn't sudden. None of it was sudden. It had been building for months, quietly, patiently, while Marcus was too consumed with keeping his company alive to notice the ground shifting beneath the people he loved. He didn't sleep that night. By 6 a.m., he was in his home office, laptop open, calling his attorney before the man had even finished his coffee. Marcus, slow down, said Reggie Coleman, who'd handled Marcus's business contracts for 3 years and had become, somewhere along the way, one of the only people Marcus fully trusted. Send me everything your father has. If there's an actual filing, it'll be public record. Give me the afternoon. The afternoon felt like a year. Marcus tried to work, tried to review the Culver City site plans, tried to return calls from his project manager, Denise, about a permitting delay, but his mind kept circling back to Simone's face outside the Prada store. The flicker of something underneath her anger. Grief, he'd thought at the time. Now he wondered if it had been guilt. Reggie called back at 4:15. Okay, it's real, but it's shakier than it sounds, Reggie said. There's an old document, a quitclaim provision buried in a 1998 refinancing your grandfather did, that's genuinely ambiguous about survivorship rights if the property passed through marriage. It's a stretch, Marcus, a real stretch, but a good enough lawyer could drag it into court and make your father's life miserable for a year trying to prove otherwise. Who's her lawyer? There was a pause on the line. That's the part you're not going to like. It's Bradley Okafor. Marcus's stomach dropped. Bradley Okafor wasn't just any attorney. He was Simone's cousin's husband, a man Marcus had sat across from at Thanksgiving dinners, a man who'd once helped Marcus move a couch into his first apartment. Family, in every sense that used to matter. She's had this planned, Marcus said quietly. Not weeks, months. I can't speak to intent, Reggie said carefully, but I can tell you the timeline lines up with when your Culver City contract went public. Local news covered it. Anyone could have seen the number attached to your name. Marcus closed his eyes. $42 million, printed in a real estate trade paper, and somewhere in Inglewood, his ex-wife had read it and started making calls. He didn't confront her right away. Instead, he did something he hadn't done in over a year. He called his mother-in-law. Ex-mother-in-law. Patricia had always liked Marcus, had in fact apologized to him privately after the divorce, for the way Simone gets when she's scared of losing things. Marcus hadn't understood the comment then. He was beginning to now. Patricia, it's Marcus. A pause, warm but cautious. Marcus, it's been a while. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me, even if it's uncomfortable. She exhaled, and in that exhale, Marcus heard a woman who'd been waiting a long time for this call. Is this about the land? His grip tightened on the phone. You knew. I found out 3 weeks ago. I told her it was wrong, Marcus. I told her your daddy built decent people, decent history, and she was about to drag his name through the mud for money she never earned. Patricia's voice cracked. She didn't listen. She hasn't been listening to anybody since she saw that truck of yours on the news. Why is she like this, Patricia? She wasn't always— He stopped himself, unsure if he even believed the sentence he was about to say. She was always scared of being poor again, Patricia said quietly. You know her daddy left us with nothing when she was 12. She swore she'd never feel that helpless again. I used to think that was just ambition. Now I think it curdled into something else a long time ago, and I didn't stop it soon enough. For the first time, Marcus felt something other than anger toward Simone, something closer to a strange, exhausted pity. The kind you feel for someone who's been running from a ghost so long they've forgotten they're the one haunting everyone around them. It didn't excuse what she was doing, but it explained it. 2 days later, Simone showed up at his office unannounced. No call, no warning, heels clicking across the marble lobby of Whitfield Structural Design like she still had every right to walk through those doors. "We need to talk," she said, ignoring his receptionist's protests. "Now." Marcus led her into his private office and shut the door, aware of every set of eyes that had followed her across the floor. "You could have called," he said. "I did call. 4 times. You didn't answer. Because I know what this is about." His voice was level, controlled, though his hands were not. "My father's land, Simone? Really?" Something shifted in her face. Not shame, but something adjacent to it, quickly buried. "That land is worth almost nothing, Marcus. This isn't about the land." "Then what is it about?" She stepped closer, and for a moment her composure cracked completely, revealing something raw underneath the calculation. "It's about the fact that I stood beside you through the worst years of your life, and the second things got good, you moved on like I was a chapter you were embarrassed of. You have no idea what it's like to watch someone build the exact life you dreamed about, the exact one, and know you're not in it anymore. You left the marriage the same way you're trying to leave with a piece of my family's history," Marcus said quietly. "By taking what isn't yours and calling it fair." Simone's eyes glistened, and for one terrible second, Marcus almost reached for her, old instinct dying hard. Then she straightened, wiped her face, and the softness vanished as quickly as it had appeared. "Drop the counterfiling my lawyer's going to send," she said, "or I go after full custody of Zoe next. I'll say whatever I need to say about your hours, your travel, your instability. Judges love a mother's testimony, Marcus. You know that." The threat landed like a physical blow. Not the land, not the money, his daughter. "You would use Zoe," he said slowly, "as leverage." "I'll do whatever it takes," Simone said, voice shaking now, whether from anger or something closer to desperation Marcus couldn't tell. "Because nobody, not you, not your father, not this whole beautiful life you built without me, is going to make me disappear." She turned and walked out, leaving Marcus standing in the center of his own office, staring at the framed rendering of the Culver City project on his wall, wondering how the woman he once promised forever to had become someone capable of threatening the one person they both claimed to love more than anything. His phone buzzed. A text from Reggie. "Just got served. She filed the custody modification an hour ago. We need to meet tonight." Reggie's office at 9 p.m. felt like a war room. Files spread across the conference table, coffee gone cold, the city lights of downtown LA blinking indifferently through the window, while Marcus's entire life sat reduced to a stack of legal paper. "The custody filing is aggressive but thin," Reggie said, sliding a document across the table. "She's alleging unstable work hours and insufficient supervision. No evidence beyond her own statement. Judges don't grant emergency modifications on vibes, Marcus. This is a pressure tactic." "It's working," Marcus said. "I haven't slept in 2 days." "That's the point of it." Reggie leaned back, rubbing his eyes. "But there's something else you need to see." He pulled out a second folder. Bank statements, a payment history, a name Marcus didn't immediately recognize. Okafor and Wells Financial Consulting. "Bradley's not just her lawyer on this," Reggie said carefully. "He's also been advising her financially for the last year. And Marcus, she's been paying him, real money. More than she should have, given what she told the court about her income during the divorce." Marcus stared at the numbers. "Where would she get that kind of money?" "That," Reggie said, "is the question I think you need to ask her directly. Because either she's been hiding income since before your divorce settlement, which would reopen the entire financial agreement in your favor, or somebody else is funding this." Marcus sat with that for a long moment, the pieces refusing to fit together cleanly. Simone had never had family money. Patricia worked as a school administrator, modest and careful with every dollar. There was no wealthy uncle, no inheritance, nothing that explained a sudden ability to retain an aggressive attorney for months on end. Unless someone else wanted Marcus destabilized just as badly as she did. He found the answer 2 days later, and it came from the last place he expected, his own company. Denise, his project manager, asked to speak with him privately after a site meeting in Culver City, her voice unusually tight. "Marcus, I need to show you something, and I need you to stay calm." She pulled up an email chain on her laptop. Internal correspondence, bid comparisons, vendor contracts, subcontractor negotiations for the Culver City development. Buried in the thread was a name that made Marcus's blood run cold. Bradley Okafor, on behalf of Riverside Equity Partners. Riverside submitted a lowball bid for the electrical subcontract 8 weeks ago, Denise said. We passed on it. Their numbers didn't make sense, too good to be true. But I did some digging after you told me about the custody filing. Riverside Equity is a shell company. Registered address traces back to a law office in Culver City. She hesitated. Same office as Bradley Okafor. Marcus felt the room tilt slightly. He was trying to get inside my project. I think, Denise said slowly, he was trying to get inside your finances. If Riverside had won that subcontract, they'd have had legal access to internal cost projections, cash flow, everything. Combine that with a custody battle destabilizing you personally and a land dispute destabilizing your father. It's not about the land, Marcus said quietly, echoing Simone's own words back at himself, understanding them now in a way he hadn't before. It never was. It's about squeezing me from every direction until I settle something, anything, just to make it stop. He thought of Simone's face outside the Prada store, the flicker of something underneath her anger that he'd mistaken for grief. He wondered now if it had been fear. Fear of Bradley, fear of whatever she'd gotten herself tangled into, chasing money she couldn't earn on her own, and, in the process, handing leverage to someone far more calculating than she was. He confronted Patricia again that evening, and this time she didn't hesitate. Bradley's been in her ear for 8 months, Patricia admitted, voice hollow with exhaustion. Ever since the divorce went final and she realized how much you were about to be worth. He told her the land claim was just an opening move, something to get lawyers talking, get you nervous, get you willing to negotiate a settlement to make it disappear quietly. I begged her to walk away from him. She said he was the only one who understood what it felt like to watch someone else win. And the custody filing? Patricia's eyes filled. That was his idea too. He told her a judge would never grant it, but that wasn't the point. The point was making you desperate enough to write a check just to protect your daughter's stability. Marcus, she reached across the table and gripped his hand, something she hadn't done since before the divorce. My daughter is not a bad person. She is a scared, prideful woman who let the wrong man convince her that hurting you was the only way to feel whole again. But you need to protect yourself, and you need to protect Zoe. Marcus drove home that night with his hands trembling on the wheel, not from anger anymore, but from the terrible clarity of finally understanding the entire shape of what had been built around him, quietly, patiently, by people who had once called themselves family. The custody hearing was scheduled for Friday morning. Marcus arrived early with Reggie at his side, a folder of his own now sitting on the table, Denise's documentation on Riverside Equity, Reggie's financial records showing Bradley's undisclosed retainer, and a sworn statement from Patricia, given willingly, detailing exactly what she'd told Marcus in her kitchen 2 nights before. Simone arrived with Bradley, both of them composed, confident, clearly expecting an easy formality before a judge unlikely to look too closely. They weren't expecting Patricia to be sitting in the gallery. The moment Simone saw her mother, something in her face fractured, the practiced calm slipping just enough for Marcus to see the panic underneath. The judge, a sharp-eyed woman named Renata Ibarra, called the hearing to order, and Bradley began his opening argument, a well-rehearsed narrative about Marcus's demanding schedule, his frequent travel, his instability as a father figure. Reggie stood when it was his turn, calm and unhurried. Your Honor, before we address the custody claim, I'd like to submit documentation relevant to the credibility of opposing counsel's motives in this matter. Bradley's expression shifted instantly. Objection, relevance. It's entirely relevant, Your Honor, Reggie said. When opposing counsel has an undisclosed financial interest in destabilizing my client through a shell corporation attempting to infiltrate his company's finances, timed precisely with this custody filing. The courtroom went silent. Judge Ibarra's eyes moved from Reggie to Bradley, then to Simone, whose face had gone pale. Counsel, the judge said slowly, I'd like to see this documentation, now. Bradley leaned toward Simone, whispering something urgent. She shook her head, then looked directly at Marcus for the first time since walking in, and in that look, Marcus saw the entire collapse happening in real time, not just of her legal strategy, of whatever fragile trust had existed between her and the man who'd talked her into this. Then Patricia stood up from the gallery. Your Honor, if I may, she said, her voice trembling but clear, I have something to say. The judge nodded, and the courtroom held its breath as Patricia walked toward the front, ready to tell the truth about everything. The shell company, the 8 months of manipulation, the land claim that was never really about land at all. And Marcus watched his ex-wife's carefully constructed war finally begin to crumble in front of everyone who mattered. Simone's hand shot out and gripped Bradley's arm. The courtroom went still. Judge Ibarra studied Simone for a long moment before nodding once. "Go ahead, Ms. Whitfield, but choose your words carefully." Simone stood, hands trembling at her sides, and for the first time in months, Marcus saw something in her that wasn't calculation or anger. It was exhaustion. The look of a woman who'd been carrying a lie so heavy it had started to break her from the inside. "I want to withdraw the custody motion," she said. Her voice cracked on the last word, and she pressed a hand to her mouth briefly before continuing. "There's nothing wrong with Marcus's parenting. There never was. I filed this because I was angry and scared, and I let someone convince me that hurting him was the only way to feel like I mattered again." Bradley reached for her arm. "Simone, don't." She pulled away from him, and the single syllable carried more finality than anything else she'd said all morning. "You told me this was about leverage, about making him negotiate. You never told me you were trying to steal information from his company. You used me, Bradley, and I let you, because I wanted to believe somebody was finally on my side." Judge Ibarra's expression sharpened. "Mr. Okafor, given what's being alleged, I'm going to recommend the State Bar review this matter separately from these proceedings. This hearing is not the venue for a fraud investigation, but I assure you, one is warranted." Bradley said nothing. He gathered his files with stiff, mechanical movements, the confidence that had carried him into the courtroom completely gone, and left without another word. Not to Simone, not to anyone. The custody motion was formally withdrawn. The land claim, Reggie confirmed quietly to Marcus, would be dropped within the week, without Bradley's legal muscle behind it. Simone had neither the resources, nor, apparently, the will to pursue it further. Marcus didn't feel triumphant walking out of that courtroom. He felt hollowed out, the adrenaline of weeks of fighting draining into something closer to grief. Grief for the marriage that had once meant something real, before fear and ambition curdled it into a weapon. Simone caught him in the hallway outside, Patricia a few steps behind her, giving them space. "I'm not going to pretend what I did was okay," Simone said quietly. "I spent months telling myself you owed me something. And somewhere in there, I forgot the only thing that actually matters is Zoe having two parents who don't destroy each other trying to win. You could have just talked to me," Marcus said, "instead of all this." "I know." Her eyes were wet, but her voice was steadier than he'd heard it in years. "I think some part of me needed to lose everything I built this scheme on before I could admit that. My mother's right. I've been running from being 12 years old and broke my whole life, and I let that fear turn me into somebody I don't recognize." Marcus studied her for a long moment. Not the woman who'd screamed at him outside a Prada storefront, not the woman who'd threatened his daughter in his own office, but underneath all of it, someone he had once loved enough to promise forever to. That person hadn't been a lie. She'd just gotten lost somewhere along the way. "For Zoe's sake," he said finally, "I hope you find your way back to who you were before all this." "Me too," Simone said, and for the first time in a long while, Marcus believed she meant it. 3 months later, Otis Whitfield stood on the Slauson property with his son, the claim fully withdrawn, the land legally secure and entirely theirs. The old lot was still mostly weeds and cracked concrete, but Otis walked it slowly, hand trailing along a rusted chain-link fence like he was greeting an old friend. "Your grandfather used to say, 'A man's worth isn't in what he owns,'" Otis said. "It's in what he refuses to let people take from him without a fight. I'm proud of you, son, not for the company, for standing your ground when it would have been easier to just pay somebody off and make it disappear." Marcus thought about that a long time, about the version of himself who might have written a check just to end the exhaustion, and how much he would have lost that could never be measured in dollars. The company continued to grow. The Culver City project broke ground on schedule, and Denise, sharp-eyed, loyal, the person who'd first uncovered Bradley's scheme, was promoted to partner. Marcus made sure of it personally. Simone, true to her word, dropped every legal maneuver and, according to Patricia, started attending therapy for the first time in her life. She and Marcus settled into an uneasy but genuine co-parenting rhythm, built slowly on the wreckage of everything that had almost destroyed it. Zoe never fully knew how close her parents had come to war over her. Marcus made certain of that, protecting the one relationship in this entire ordeal that had never been anything but pure. On a Wednesday evening months later, Marcus pulled up outside Simone's apartment to pick up Zoe, the G-Wagon no longer a symbol of anything except a truck he liked driving. Simone came to the door, and instead of crossed arms and accusation, she offered something smaller, quieter, a genuine smile. "She's excited," Simone said. "Talked about you all day." "Thank you," Marcus said, "for not making this harder than it needed to be tonight." Simone nodded, something unspoken passing between them. Not romance, not the ghost of what they'd once been, but something more durable. Respect, maybe. The kind two people can only earn after surviving the worst versions of each other, and choosing, finally, to be better for the sake of someone they both loved more than their pride. Zoe ran out laughing, and Marcus lifted her into the truck, buckling her seatbelt with hands that, for the first time in a long while, felt steady. Trust, once broken, doesn't return the way it left. It comes back slower, more careful, built brick by brick on a foundation of choices rather than promises. Marcus learned that lesson the hard way. Learned that love, without honesty, is just a beautiful lie waiting for its moment to collapse. And that real strength isn't refusing to feel hurt, but refusing to let hurt turn you into someone you'd be ashamed to explain to your own child one day. Family isn't only the people who show up when life is easy. It's the people who stay to fight for what's right, even when the truth is inconvenient, even when walking away would be simpler. And sometimes, the hardest, most important victory isn't winning against the person who wronged you. It's refusing to let their worst moment define who you become. If this story moved you the way it moved me to tell it, let me know in the comments what part hit hardest. And if you believe in second chances, in families finding their way back to the truth, don't forget to subscribe. There are so many more stories like this one waiting to be told. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.